Ortiz hurriedly finished his sandwich. The breakfast had been bad. The landlady had bought the cheapest ham, stringy and slippery. Eating it, Ortiz felt like a wild animal tearing at its prey. And afterward, he spent a long time picking at his pale gums with a toothpick, but he had no choice. There was no time even for complaints. Service began promptly at 9, and the magistrate's office was several blocks away. Out of the corner of his eye, Ortiz caught a barely noticeable movement at the door. The landlady stood there motionless, like a stone-step woman, about whom he had recently read a very informative article. Ortiz rose from the table and greeted her as politely as possible. "Good day, Frau Zanicki. The weather is wonderful today, isn't it?" Frau Zanek did not answer. She rarely spoke to Ortiz, and then only on business. He had long since gotten used to not paying attention to such a blatant lack of politeness, inappropriate for a lady and landlady. But today, the demonstrative silence slightly offended Ortiz, because the day really was wonderfully fine, and he wanted everyone to be happy. Frau Zanicki stepped aside to let Ortiz pass. There was no contempt, no superiority, no hostility in her eyes, only emptiness, which Ortiz did not want to look into. He quickly ran down the stairs, dark and echoing, jumped out onto the sunny street, and only then tried to give his step the sedateness necessary for a magistrate official, even the most minor. People looked at him the same way as yesterday. The baker Deleuze and the bookseller Franz, a flock of schoolgirls, gardeners, nannies with red-cheeked, screaming bags, and he took off his hat and joyfully greeted them, congratulating them on the new day and the wonderful weather, and trying not to look into their eyes. Entering the magistrate, he inhaled the familiar and so pleasant smell. Old papers and ink, nodded to a couple of scribes with whom he had often drunk beer before, and hurried like a mouse to his workplace, where Mr. Guy was already waiting for him. "Ortiz, today there are 5 urgent and 10 non-urgent. The materials are almost ready to be transferred to the court. Now it's up to you," Mr. Guy said quickly. "I recommend that you begin immediately. The first case is already in the room." Ortiz nodded quickly, feeling a surge of excitement in his soul, as he always did when he realized how important his modest work was. The room, a long, narrow room, damp and dark, where he prepared cases for trial, was only a few meters away. The first case was waiting for him. The daughter-in-law of Frau Seneca, the landlady, thin and sinewy, a high school teacher with a slashed back. Alas, the cases were delivered in an improper form, extremely sloppy, but that was why he was here, to rectify the situation. Just recently, the case of Frau Seneca's son had been heard in the magistrate's office, undoubtedly, deservedly so, and he, Ortiz, could have cast a contemptuous glance at the landlady in the morning, but he had shown nobility and understanding, as befits a well-bred man. Case number 20386 fraction 17. Is that correct? The woman was silent, looking at him stupidly, like a dying cow. "Let's finish quickly. We shouldn't keep the magistrates. It would be impolite, especially since it's such a beautiful day," Ortiz said kindly, taking out a pair of pliers and breaking Frau Seneca's daughter-in-law's index finger with a crunch. She howled, her whole body shaking. Ortiz waited a little until the convulsions subsided a little and continued. Half an hour later, the case was ready for transfer to the court, and Mr. Guy nodded favorably to Ortiz. In the evening, Ortiz hurried back to his little room, greeting everyone he knew on the way, and he really knew everyone, and trying not to look too hard at the emptiness that filled the eyes of Deleuze and Franz and the nannies and the schoolgirls, an emptiness that did not frighten him. Is it possible to be afraid of something that does not exist, but awakened in his soul a strange vision? All the cases accepted for trial, which had passed through his skillful and industrious hands, stood next to his house, on the steps, in the hallway, and on the threshold of the room surrounded him, sitting in an old armchair, in a tight ring, and did not allow him to see a single glimmer of this wonderful sunny day.